I'm calling the Zoning and Annexation Committee meeting to order. My name is Cheryl Ramos, and I'm the chair. And with me tonight are committee members Dan Lanzer and Mitch Pace. And our alternate, Mr. Rippeth, is excused tonight. So the purpose of the meeting is to consider a request by the Friends of the Homeless to amend the residential zoning code for a portion of 435 Fair Avenue Northeast rear, parcel number 4301969001, to permit operation of a homeless shelter, 20 beds for women and 20 beds for men in 6 family units, and any other matter that would come before the committee. First of all, I'd like to welcome you all to the meeting tonight. And you can see the agenda is posted up on the screen. I hope that you can read it, but we'll guide you through this. The rules of the meeting are going to be, please, I hope everybody signed in on the sign-in sheet. And speakers are asked to clearly state your name and address. And of course, this goes without saying, but I'm going to say it anyways. Be respectful of others and observe a time limit of 3 minutes for comment during your appropriate time slot. We will be timing the minutes, and I don't like to use a gavel, but I will if I have to. And so we're staying on topic, and that is of zoning. So first I would like to ask if Mr. Dematio is here. Okay. He was invited. He is a property owner. Okay. Now we're going to move to statements from residents who live within 200 feet of the proposed and current site in the neighborhood, and lastly, parents who have children who attend East Elementary or the preschool there. You don't have to get up. The microphone will be passed to you, and Larry is our mic man. So it's open for you now, 3-minute time limit. So who wants to go first?
I'll go first. Good evening. My name is Ronald Linden. I live at 303 Beaver Avenue, Northeast, New Philadelphia. The property which they are wanting to change is directly behind my property, which I purchased 9 years ago. I have had to pay continuously flood insurance for this area. The property behind me does get flooded. It does hold water, and it also does my property. I have pictures here that I can give to council to show from today how the property looks. Also, I have statements from other states that show how much it reduces the property value when a homeless shelter is built into your area. I purchased this home so that my son, who I'm raising as a single father, as a 10-year-old, I can leave it to him someday. Paid $79,000 for it 9 years ago. I put a lot of money into this house. It's going to deplete the property value of this, and I know for a fact the road they're going to put in is my house, a little house, and then a church. That road is going to go within 5 foot from that house. I've got that picture also. That yard is flooded constantly from the overflow from the field and whatnot. If they put a road through there, we have no chance. If they can make that into whatever and say that's not a flood zone, well, then our house isn't a flood zone. I've wasted 9 years of money on flood zone. And I'll be honest with you, if this goes through, I will sell my house as soon as it goes through, just so I can get the most I can get out of it and get out of New Philly. And I hate to do that because this is the only school system my son has ever known. He's in sports. He's on New Philly swim team. He's on the soccer team. I will remove him from this area. Do I think there needs to be a homeless shelter? Absolutely. There needs to be a new one. This is a flood zone. I've spoken to Albert in the past, the guy who owns the property. His original intention, cut down the trees, make it into a trailer court. He could never do that because it was a flood zone. But now all of a sudden it's okay to build a homeless shelter there. I don't get it. It's unacceptable to me, and I think it's unfair. I do think, yes, the homeless do need a place. that is not the spot. It's just going to cause so much difficulty. And it's, the foundation of the place will eventually have problems because that area is completely saturated all the time. And Albert knows that, and Jeff Mathias knows that. So, I mean, I hope it gets built someplace. I heard the old Twilight Drive-In, they were considering there, and also I heard a place out on Snyder Crossing Road that guy was willing to sell. Maybe too far out, I don't know, but yes, I pray that one gets built, but this is just not a good place for the residents or for the homeless shelter. It's not going to, that is a saturated piece of land. That is why it was a flood zone, and it is still a flood zone. That's all I have to say.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Thank you.
Larry, we'll pass the mic to the next person.
Hi, I'm Alicia Williams, 211 Beaver Avenue Northeast. I've only lived here since November. My property was $180,000. I'm a longtime resident of Dover. I moved over here because I feel like I grew up here, I went to school here, and I personally think it's a great community. I, however, did not realize on the agenda of this was a homeless shelter near my home. I've lived here for 5 months. I have to have cameras in every area. The police have been to my house multiple times due to break-ins because people are trying to steal things. And I believe that the homeless shelter is a great option. I don't want it in my neighborhood, personally. That's just my opinion. I believe that it's a great program, but I also believe that a lot of the addiction and a lot of the other crime that have came to our community is directly related to that. And when you can't do those type of things in your shelter, you're going to walk through your community and do those things. And I'm not saying that that pertains to every family or person that is there. Some are there legitimately, some maybe not. I don't know. I try to help when I can, given money, but I personally don't want to see my property value go down the drain within the first year, because at that point, then I too also am gonna have to put my house back on the market because it's not gonna have any value. And when I do try to do that, they're gonna say, well, there's a homeless shelter. So what's gonna happen to my property value? It's also going to go down. So with that being said, this is my first time ever coming to a meeting, and I feel like it's something that does need to be spoke out upon. And I just personally am not for it. If there's a better place for it, I would be all about it. I personally don't think directly in town is. However, I realize there are services that are available in town that are not available out of town. But you can also get into a lot of the things in town that you wouldn't necessarily be doing if it was not directly in town. So my opinion is I don't want it in my neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you.
Alana Bennington, I live at 429 Kaiserman Avenue. Your access road is going to cut right in front of my house, okay? The church is directly across the street from my house. I also currently work at Marty's Coach's Corner, where I get all of the homeless shelter traffic, and I see on a daily basis what comes in there. You all claim that you don't let anybody who drinks. They're not allowed to drink. They're not allowed to do drugs. They're not allowed to do this. They have all these rules, and I understand people break rules, but I've had to increase my alcohol, excuse me, sales because of people who live at the homeless shelter. I had somebody last week overdose in my store that lived at the homeless shelter. Okay, he was from the homeless shelter. They had to come and get his bike from the store. And the lady who came and got the bike said, oh, he just got kicked out of Speedway because he was playing with himself at the booth. Okay? I see what comes in there. Yes, it's not every person that lives there. I get it. I was there when that homeless shelter was made. I helped Mike make it. I used to volunteer there all the time. But the drug problem and the alcohol problem is not being taken care of. Okay? I see it every day. If you guys want to come and spend the day at Marty's and see what I see, I know they live at the homeless shelter. They pull out their food cards, they get some, food, and then they pull out their money, buy some alcohol, and they drink it. I gotta hide. I need a bag for that. I gotta hide. They can't see me drinking this. One of my employees went through the homeless shelter. She said She had to get out of there to stay clean. Drugs are readily available in there for her to do. She was dirty the whole time she stayed there. And she was not able to get clean until she left there. So, for you guys selling all of these fallacies that everybody's clean there, everybody's doing what they're supposed to be doing, that is a blatant lie. And everything I read about it, it just makes me mad because I have to live it every day. I have to kick people out because they are unruly, they are drunk, they are behind our store, shooting up drugs, coming in, overdosing. I'm all about helping people. I do it all the time. I don't mind, but it's not the place for it. That trail behind my house goes directly all the way to that field. All of those people that you guys do not allow into the homeless shelter because they weren't accepted are then left to wander. They have nowhere else to go. So where are they going to end up? In that trail behind the homeless shelter,
The Crider Avenue?
So I live right in front of Beaver Creek.
Okay,
So the walking trail back there.
okay.
So that's what I have to say.
Thank you very much.
The walking trail runs right along behind the church that's down there.
Yes.
And they'll go down and they'll make two little camps along the bottom. Because I walk my dogs with my son, and they're always camping down there.
Thank you. Pastor Lisa is sick. Jesse and I are board members. We're chairman of the board for Preach the Word Ministries. We will be the ones mostly affected by this whole thing. And we are probably the strongest ones against it. Simply for crime, for the children that are back there spring, summer, and fall playing in a church in the parking lot. We've picked up needles already. We've picked up dirty condoms. I'm the cleaning lady too. So I picked up that stuff too. And Pastor Lisa's husband, Ron, we've caught people sleeping in the back porch and on the side place. I even saw an open suitcase there. Where the person was, I don't know. But we've had to call the cops too, and we don't want that in our area. We're going to take the most of it. It's in the needles. We don't want that. And for the past 11 years, that little, what do you call that little alleyway? We have maintained that little alleyway with snow plowing. I've been out there spraying every month. I've been spraying the weeds. We've been cluttering the crap off there. And there's crap on there. There's diapers, there's needles, there's everything. We've been maintaining that. And now our parking lot is going to get taken from us. And, this project was birthed in deception, right down to our address, 327 Northeast Beaver. That's Preach the Word. That was a lie. The photo was a lie. The lady even said, I was told to position right here and take my camera with this angle. That's a lie. It is birthed in deception and it will reap deception. And the sad thing is all these neighbors in the neighborhood, in the community, which we're all called to protect. And what is best for the community and the neighborhood? What is best? Well, we need a shelter, but not in the middle of where people live, where it's open season on people.
Thank you.
We live in Walnut Creek, Sugar Creek area, but we're board members of Preach the Word Ministries. And if you look on that map up there, you'll see Preach the Word Ministries. It was totally ignored. It was never contacted. The pastor was never notified of any meeting, the last meeting that they had here, months ago. They're talking about widening the alley, so the neighbor is going to lose property. The church is going to lose property. And whoever came up with the idea of this picture is brilliant. Because if you look at it,
This one?
It's loaded.
one of the comments, yes, that one. One of the comments that Jeff Matthias said at that other meeting was there's just a few houses back there. And if you look at it, how many houses are in that area in a quarter mile, half mile? It's just packed full. There's no argument about the need of a homeless shelter. The question is location. It's all about location. And one of the reasons that it was turned down across from the airport, the neighbors were concerned about crime. This picture vividly shows the amount of residential neighbors in that on that property, or close to the property. It's
Could we have your
humongous.
name, please?
Jesse Stutzman. We're board members of Preach the Word
Yeah,
Ministries.
thank you.
So, yeah, location, it's all about location, and that is not a location for a homeless shelter.
Thank you.
Yeah, we'll get back there in a second here.
Travis Wright, 413 Beitler Avenue Northeast in New Philly. My wife and I and our 3 young girls, we have lived in this community now for 12 years. We love our neighborhood. We love our community, our home. And I stand in strong support of this homeless shelter. I have had direct relationship with the homeless shelter. We've done multiple outreaches there. We have taken our children there, developed relationships with the residents in the homeless shelter for the last 12 years. We have never once felt threatened. We have been received with love and compassion. Our church currently serves the homeless shelter and the residents of the homeless shelter meals multiple times a week. And we've been doing this now for years. We have a close relationship with Joe and other directors, past directors of the homeless shelter. And it is something that we feel like is extremely vital for our community. Our church, currently, we have a recovery ministry, a thriving recovery ministry, where we minister to between 60 and 80 every week. And I understand the drug epidemic. I understand that we have many, many issues that are threatening and that are scary to talk about and deal with. But we directly minister to and have relationship with many recovering addicts. Not one of them, ironically, has ever come from the homeless shelter. So we can talk about the crime, we can talk about the drug addiction and the drug epidemic and all of these issues, but the reality is it's everywhere. It's not just at the homeless shelter. And we've been seeing the effects of this. We work closely with Jody Salvo and the Anti-Drug Coalition and the Adams Board. My wife and I, we serve as pastors in this community. Firsthand, we see it on a weekly basis, the death, and we see the negative impact of these issues. But if we think that a homeless shelter, not having a homeless shelter or not having it in this community is going to solve any of this, I think we're gravely mistaken. And I feel like to serve these people and these families who are there, it's in our neighborhood. We've lived there 12 years. We have 3 little girls, and in no way do we feel worried or threatened about a homeless shelter being in our neighborhood. Thank you.
Thank you. I think there was a guy up here, yeah.
Yeah, my name's Leonard Pompey. I live at 271 Beaver Avenue, which adjoins the property you're referring to. And I've lived there over 70 years, and I've known that property to flood several times. And all the property in that area that are in the floodplain, when they want to do anything to their homes, they can't do anything because they live in a floodplain. In fact, my neighbor, he wanted to put a deck on his house, and they told him he couldn't put a deck on his house because he lived in a floodplain. So he told me he's building a boat dock. But anyhow, you can say all you want. That's a dedicated street down through there. It was at one time. Gray Avenue Extension is what they called it. It ran all the way down to 13th Street. I don't know why they never completed it, but they didn't. But there's a lot of people utilize that for like a walking trail down through there along the creek. It's nice. But if you put a homeless shelter in down there, it's going to change the environment of the whole neighborhood. And also, you got a grade school there close. I know the superintendent said she has no objections, but does she live in that neighborhood? No. So how can she say there's no objections? All the parents that send their kids to that school, how can she say they're not objecting to it? So I'm going to be short. That's all I got to say.
Thank you.
Thank you. My name's David Moss. I live on 249 Forbes Street, Northeast. I can see this area from my house. My concern is mainly the influx of all these new neighbors, 50, 60 people, regardless if it's a shelter, a trailer park, apartment, whatever. I think it's too many people to introduce into a residential neighborhood. Plus with the school traffic, I think it could get disruptive, traffic-wise and people-wise, in a neighborhood like that. That's all I've got.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Terry Robinson. I've been here before. I just bought the house at 548 Ray Avenue Northeast rear. I'm directly in the middle of those three houses that sit there on the edge of that property. I own the only house in that little sector that Albert DiMatteo does not own. Bought my house in July with the knowledge that was a flood zone, but nobody could build around me. That's the reason I bought my house, because my son is nonverbal autistic. I wanted to raise him in an area where I thought was safe, secure. I had a school close by. I just thought it was the right location, and now I'm being thrown at, we want to build a homeless shelter basically in your backyard. I don't have an objection with them doing that. Just everybody that is so for this homeless shelter, come live in this neighborhood. You want my house? I'll sell it to you. I mean, if you're so for it, everybody's so for it, but nobody wants to be in that neighborhood. So everybody that's so for it, put that homeless shelter in your neighborhood and see how you feel. I mean, I have 5 boys, and I see the traffic that's walking behind my property day in and day out, the people that walk their dogs. It's a great area. It's a great community. I don't want to see that turn into something crazy. I spoke with Albert. He wants to cut the driveway that runs right directly in front of my house. He wants to cut the bushes down and make that a connecting drive. Have you seen the traffic coming off that school? I come home at 3 o'clock daily. It's crazy. I almost got hit today just coming home. So I understand there needs to be one. Like I said, I've been here before. I spoke with Mitch. I spoke with Dan. I'm just totally against this. And if I'm the same as Mr. London, if this were to come to the surface, I've already contacted my realtor. My house will be on the market the same day. It's just not a place that I'm going to live. I moved to Philly from Tuskegee with the fact that this is a great area. I put my son in school here. I love where I live. I love my house, but I don't want a homeless shelter in my backyard. I don't want to have to feel that if something happens, you know what I mean, who was it? Or who is that in my yard at, late at night? Or who is that in my yard in the morning? Or, I have a nonverbal autistic son that plays outside. Yes, we're out there with them. It's just a safety thing for me. I'm a former military police officer, so for me, I always have my eyes open. So that's all I have to say. I understand it needs to be one. I just don't want it in my yard. And to do with the rest of the residents here, I just agree. It's a great area. Why mess with it? Because you start messing with a zoning annex, you're doing it for one person. Who are you going to do it for next? I mean, that's just how I see it. You're going to put a homeless shelter in there. Who's to say someone don't come to you and say, okay, since you let that happen, let's build
Thank
this
you.
here. Okay.
Thank you very much.
That's all I have to say, ma'am.
Thank you.
Leslie Wright, 413 Beitler Avenue. Our house is right up at the top corner of the picture. My husband already spoke, so I'm going to keep this short, but I do believe that the homeless shelter needs to be in New Philly, in a location where people have access. Not only adults are there are children, families that need a place to go in an emergency situation. And as a citizen of New Philadelphia, I've been born and raised here. I believe that it is important, it is vital that we provide a place for the homeless shelter to exist in a location that is convenient for people to get help, to get get back on their feet. And I would be happy if it was in my neighborhood. I'm a believer in Jesus Christ, and I know that this is what we are called to serve and take care of the homeless. If it's not in our neighborhood, it does need to be in our city. I have been proud to say, as a citizen of New Philadelphia, that we have a homeless shelter, that it exists in our town, that we have this kind of help. And so I'm asking you, if you are not considering this neighborhood, don't move it outside of city limits. It needs to be a place where people can get help, and they do get help in the shelter. I know I'm directly connected to someone who helps run the shelter, has for years, and they do not allow drug activity and alcohol activity in the building. And I realize it happens all around, but no matter where it is, it's going to happen. And in reality, it's only blocks away from where we live right now. We have a drug dealer in every street in this city that is from the Tuscarawas County Board of Adams Board. So it's already happening in my backyard. And I am not afraid to love on people and help them and get help. We cannot push this out of the city. We have to provide some place for people to go.
Thank you. Anyone else that's a resident? Oh,
Hi, my name is Mary Visdos. My husband John and I kind of typed this up because I knew you only had 3 minutes. The homeless shelter may be needed in Tuscarawas County, but it does not need to be in my quiet New Philadelphia residential neighborhood. I live at 311 Beitler Street. I will look out my front windows, and there will be that, across the creek, and there will be that homeless shelter. Maybe we should look into something else, but that area is just not where I'd like it to be. The majority of the people who reside in the shelter are recovering from alcohol or substance abuse addictions, leaving the Pathway to Wellness program with nowhere to live. In the homeless shelter representative's own words, the shelter needs to be located near the downtown area so that the residents are in close proximity to social services, employment services, and the courts, so that residents can check in with their probation officers. I'm worried about crime and drug activity. Currently, there is a lot of loitering near the facility. What happens to the people who come to that place to live and are turned away? Where do they go? The proposed site is a floodplain, which is why Mr. DeMatteo did not build the apartments there that he intended to when he purchased it and removed all the trees from the property several years ago. Flood insurance will have to be purchased to secure a loan. Yes, there are a lot of signatures and voices for the shelter. We're not denying that there needs to be a shelter. But I can bet that hardly any of those people that are so in favor of it are going to be affected having it in their neighborhood. If you don't live near the proposed location or are not going to be affected by this location, you do not have a right to say, this is a great location. Sure, you're all for it because it does not affect you, and that in itself is a relief for you. If allowed to put the shelter at the proposed site, you will devalue my home and neighborhood. As a home buyer, I would definitely not choose one near a homeless shelter. When my husband and I built our home on Beitler in 1996, there was a field full of trees across the creek from my house, not a homeless shelter. This site needs to remain residential. I do not want to look out the windows in the front of my home and see a large homeless shelter as my view. Mrs. Petro claims it will not hurt the property values, but in reality, you need to ask yourself, if you had a choice when purchasing a new home, would you choose to live near the shelter? I don't think so. I like my quiet residential neighborhood and want it to stay that way. To you, the zoning board, I'm respectfully asking you to vote no to this proposed site. Please give my neighborhood the unanimous no vote that you gave the site on East High Avenue across from Harry Cleaver Field. The residents in this neighborhood have the same concerns as the residents in that area. The council gave that site a unanimous no vote. If you allow this site to be the new homeless shelter, it will only be a matter of time until the Pathway to Wellness building will follow to that location. Thank you.
thank you. Any other resident?
I don't think that any of us are opposed to the shelter. I think we all think it's a great idea. Honestly, I think it is,
It's just a location,
It's
and
the
that's what we're
location.
discussing
Correct.
tonight, is the
Yeah.
amending for
and the fact
the
of what it
location.
could potentially bring, and what we're already dealing with in New Philly with understaffed police officers who, you know what I mean, are trying to patrol areas and make sure that everyone's being safe when all of the people that are not contributing to society are out running the streets in the middle of the night, breaking into cars, and I'm speaking personally because it's happened to me and I've only been here a few months. I think that's what we're worried about. We're worried about the break-in. We're worried about you know what I mean? I don't want my kid talking to a stranger they don't know. Be it that you may be the best person ever, that's fine, but you're a stranger, and I don't want that in my yard, and I don't want you stopping to try to talk to my kid or pet my dog or do any of those things, because I don't want any of that going on with any of my neighbors. I just want all of us to mind our own business, keep our yards up, and keep our property value up, because at the end of the day, if the house doesn't sell for what we put into it, it's a waste for everybody in this room. And I think that's where we're at. I don't think that it's anyone not wanting the shelter at
Right.
all.
So the issue, like I said, is that particular spot. So it had to be spot zoned. Okay, so now we're going to move. Thank you everyone for your comments. I know we're ahead on the agenda, and that's okay. Okay, go ahead, I'm sorry. He's gonna pass you the mic.
The owner of Marty's is a very good friend of mine, and I have just texted them, and they would not have,
Could you speak up, ma'am, and say your
Yes.
name and address?
the owner of Marty's, I just texted her, she would not have said the same things this lady said.
Okay, now wait a minute, we're not discussing that. What is your name?
My name is Kathy Bachman. I
And
have
you
grandchil-
are, where
I
do you
have
live?
grandchildren at East School.
And you have grandkids at East School?
Mm-hmm. Yes, I do.
Okay, so we're not discussing what this lady said. I want to hear what you have to say.
I work there every day, ma'am.
Pardon me?
You can come spend the day with me if you'd like.
Pardon me?
Okay, excuse me. All right, we're not discussing what this lady said. I want to hear what you have to say, and only you.
Well, that's what I wanted to say. I said
Okay,
what I
well, I'm
wanted to
just
say.
counting that, thank you. All right, okay, so we're gonna move ahead in our agenda. Do we have another resident? Okay,
Can I ask just a quick question?
yes.
Regarding this whole situation, so I spoke with Albert, it's been a couple months ago, and he's trying to sell everything that he owns in that area. So it makes you wonder, regarding the situation, what's the benefit to put a homeless shelter in that location? I mean, that's asking you as board members, what's the benefit? I mean, that's what I keep thinking about. Maybe I'm wrong in thinking this, maybe I'm wrong in thinking maybe it shouldn't be there sometimes, but then I look, what's the benefit? Is there really a benefit for these homeless shelter families that are gonna be there?
What was simply asked us, and under the ordinance 1151, actually it can be the property owner, but the Friends of the Homeless Board verbally requested council to take up considering an amendment to this particular property, which you're right is 435 Fair Avenue, Fair Avenue rear, northeast rear. So that's what we're considering. As to the other, the property owner was invited to be here tonight to explain why he would want it rezoned. But from my understanding, he offered the property to Friends of the Homeless, and they asked us to consider amending the residential zoning code. So that's all we're looking at tonight, is residential, and the purpose and goals of the residential zoning code. And I hate to throw this out, but we have copies, it's on the website if you want to see it, is chapter 1161. So we have to stick with that. That's what we'll be considering. We also have, Mary mentioned back there, I think it was Mary, we have a copy of the petition that residents did sign. And this is a copy. We have the original Mr. Pace has the original. We have at least, 66? And I've also gotten emails from different people in the community, in that neighborhood, voicing their opposition and giving me good zoning reasons why to oppose that. So the committee all has those. I would like to move then, since we're ahead on the agenda, I've given a portion of the time to, and they have 9 minutes or less, to the Friends of the Homeless board members. They were to have 2 to 3 representatives of the board here tonight to answer concerns from the committee and/or the administration. And council might ask questions too, and issues raised during previous statements to address residential zoning purposes and goals. And I did, so I'm going to ask some questions first. So any of you, who is it? Matt Rissert and Ben.
Ben Lippert.
And Joe. Okay. So I had asked a number of questions to Reverend Joe, and he graciously answered those questions. And so, of course, it led to more questions on my behalf. I wanted to get some clarification. I had asked, my question was, where do the people go who have been denied access? Is the New Philadelphia Police Department informed? And the answer was that they had a governing body of the federal grant and Coalition of Homeless and Housing in Ohio prohibited under the HIPAA Act to disclose that information. So, could you explain to me what you mean by governing board of your federal grant?
This would be the board that controls, thank you. This would be the board that controls that specific grant in the state of Ohio. And they specifically put in that clause in order to protect third-party information or from any agency leaking any information about any of the residents that enter the program for sake of privacy.
Okay, because HIPAA is health information only.
Yes, it also covers that information as well.
So you have another privacy disclosure in there too?
Yes, almost any of the state or the federal grants are going to have that protection of privacy for individuals.
I talked to the chief of police today, and he was wondering if you guys could forward to him a copy of that?
Yes, I can see that our executive director gets him the specific information.
Thank you. Did you guys have any more questions based on the? Okay, of course, I might have more questions, but I'll let you guys, I promised you guys some time, so go ahead. Address the zoning concerns that you've heard here tonight.
Okay. Well, I am Reverend Joe Svencara, pastor of the First Presbyterian Church in New Philadelphia, also president of the board for Friends of the Homeless. And I'll just speak a little bit about why specifically this property we have taken interest in. We have gone through 3 to 4 different properties in the city before. One of the problems with the zoning procedures is that a homeless shelter is not specifically listed within the zoning ordinances. There's no specific place, no section where it says a homeless shelter can be built. And that's what's caused some confusion. That's what has caused us to go into this search into the community. We want to try to keep it in New Philadelphia for the purpose of making sure that it is remaining central, that our residents have the ability to access and have all the social service agencies that they need to in order to remain in their programs, as well as just for general convenience as well, because New Philadelphia is the county seat. We are the geographic center for Tuscarawas County. So it makes it much easier for people seeking services to come here. And specifically, we go into the zoning code, section 116109, subsection D, where it talks about social services and the permitted uses in a residential area, general and special hospitals, health centers, institutions for the aged, and family homes. And that's the section that we thought we applied under. And when we got multiple opinions and multiple legal avenues about this, we also approached Dover in some of their zoning codes as well. And their law director considers Friends of the Homeless to be a multifamily residential. And since the majority of some of the codes come from Dover or are applied from Dover, we thought we might fit into that category as well. And we also received supporting evidence from the National Homelessness Law Center in Washington, D.C., which talks about how a homeless shelter does, if it in fact does, perform the tasks of, say, a hotel, a motel, a multifamily housing, or an assisted living facility, that it can in fact apply. So we believe that that applies to us, and that's why we believe this would be an optimal site for us as well, given that there has been a lot of confusion as to where we do apply in the zoning code.
Just to note, you are aware that Dover has their own zoning code.
That is correct.
Yeah, and multifamily is not in our residential zoning code. It's two-family.
Okay, 116109, Section A, residential multifamily dwellings.
Okay, tell me that section again.
116109A.
Sorry. Okay, that's a permitted conditional use, and that the zoning board of appeals would have to permit that. And as far as social services, I refer you back to the, for your information, the August 22nd, August 2nd, 2022 letter that you received from the law director referring to that information, social services. And as for the other letter that I got when I was walking out the door and didn't get a chance to read part of it until we got to ready for the meeting tonight, from the National Law Center for the Homeless, I have to refer that to the law director, who is not here tonight. Okay, so that's, I'm not a lawyer, sorry. So I had to refer, I've been instructed by him to refer any legal questions that arise to him as far as from another lawyer. Okay. Thank you.
Matt Ritzert, I am the co-chairperson of the House of Hope Committee at the Friends of the Homeless. That committee is charged with finding a location for a new shelter and then subsequently raising the funds for the shelter. And just to follow up on what Reverend Joe mentioned, it's our belief that as a social service agency, and the homeless shelter would fall under the residential zoning code. Several of the residents, I thank all the residents who spoke up tonight. I think it takes some courage, and I greatly appreciate their concerns. It is our intention to construct a multi-million-dollar facility that will be well-planned, that will have plenty of privacy, plenty of green space around it. There's been some concerns about traffic, and despite the fact that this would be a multi-family type of facility, the homeless shelter does not generate a lot of traffic. I have spent time inside the shelter. I have never been threatened. I have found children coming back from school. I've played cards with kids. I've chatted with residents. I've read passages of the Bible with residents. It is very much a family atmosphere, and I have, in my experience, seen no evidence of drug use or a lot of loitering around the facility, which are some of the concerns that have been raised by the residents. Certainly, there is a drug problem in our community. Certainly, there is a problem with poverty in our community. I mean, the Dover Philly Food Pantry serves 600 families every week. Yes, there's poverty and there's drug issues in our community, but there is no basis in fact to blame the homeless shelter for those type of problems. The vast majority of people who ask to stay at the shelter are from our community. We're not attracting people from outside who are drug addicts or other types of people that would cause problems to our community. They're here, and they will be here whether the shelter is here or not. We need to help them. Thank you.
And could I just remind you guys to constrain your remarks to zoning issues?
I'm trying to do that, but you mentioned also issues raised by the residents, and so
Right,
that's what I
yes.
was responding
But the
to. Thank
services
you.
that we're all well acquainted with the services you provide.
Correct. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Ben Lippert, pastor Shinburn Moravian Church, 126 22nd Street Southeast. I would just remind when we're talking about this zoning issue for the residents here, this was not our option A. Option A was the central business district, but the law director, Mr. Feet, decided that despite the Friends of the Homeless having a 501c that states that we are a nonprofit business, he decided that we were not a business. So this is like option H for us we're working on, but we're just trying to make the best of it. First talking point is you mentioned you had 66 people on your petition against it. I will submit for your interest. We have 245 New Philadelphia residents who signed in support of this
Ben,
specific
let me
location.
just interrupt you. The question was not the same. The question here was specifically not to allow changes to our residential zoning in Ward 2, not to allow homeless shelter to purchase and build in our neighborhood, and not to amend the change of the zoning code. So it was quite different than your question that you asked on change.org.
We still have 245 residents of support. There's nothing that goes against that.
And the
they
question
are in
was,
specific
Ben,
support
what was the
of this.
question? The question was, do you support a homeless shelter in New Philadelphia, correct?
I'd have to double check. We wrote that in
Yeah,
December
that's
with.
the question. I have the petition here.
Okay,
Thank
that's fine. Yeah, so we have a strong community support despite arguing over the semantics of the petition. 245 people from New Philadelphia, 400 residents of T County who have supported that. I want to thank the residents who spoke about the floodplain issue, both here and at our open forum. That was something we discussed as a board, and we decided that we would be happy to buy floodplain insurance if needed. A lot of talk about the theater down by my church, which I would be happy to support as well. But one of the reasons we think that's most economical, many of you are talking about being blue-collar homeowners. As a pastor, I can definitely understand that. That would cost, what, was it $100,000 more than what Beaver Avenue would cost? So being economical as homeowners, as people who are struck in our mission, we still feel it's more economical to be here, to have that amendment, because we're just paying for flood insurance instead of paying for an exorbitant amount for a property. And then the last thing I want to add is when we looked at this from a zoning issue, we did reach out to other communities in Van Wert, Ohio, who addressed this issue recently. Were able to get this approved with a conditional use permit. And the conditions they had included two things, but the Friends of the Homeless would be open to including more things. They would be such as must be a supervised person on site at all times at the shelter, which we currently do. A fence could be discussed. I know this gentleman over here was discussing about privacy. We also want privacy for our residents. That's important. We want to make sure they feel safe and comfortable as well. So I think that's something we could find some common ground on. And all residents of the shelter receive background checks. This is very important. We received word last month, actually we were able to help the city of New Philadelphia. We had somebody who came into Louisiana, or I can't remember if it was Louisiana or Texas, to our shelter, unknown to the city of New Philadelphia. They had a warrant for their arrest in that state. Because of our background check, that criminal was caught. Because they went through Friends of the Homeless, we were cooperated with that. We were able to work through that. And then number 4, no resident with a history of sexual crimes or arson will be allowed residence. I really think that's important for you in the community to know that. We help many victims of abuse. We are there for them. We're there to support them. We're there to help them. We want to be an outlet for them. So we're not talking about bringing pedophiles into your community. We're talking about helping people who need to be kept safe and protected.
Right, we're
That's-
talking zoning issue, that's not technically a zoning issue, that's more of your opinion or how you feel,
Were you talking about a zoning issue?
Okay,
That's what we're here for zoning.
excuse me. Okay, so, thank you for bringing it up. Remind me, on the questions that you asked me, you said that you don't admit people with recent violent criminal history. So I wondered if you could qualify for me what recent meant.
That'd be Calvin. I wouldn't know what.
That Pastor Joe, or Reverend Joe probably knows the answer to that.
Did you want to?
Yeah, we can just tag team. Yeah, we don't allow anyone in the shelter that has any criminal history, any violent criminal history, which is on average about if the crime was committed more than 5 years ago or such.
Okay, so that's what you mean by recent?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
not like, oh, they were released last week and they are allowed to come in. Because we believe that people need to prove a pattern of behavior if they're stable enough to be in a communal setting.
Okay, thank you. And also I wanted
Cheryl,
to
one last
address,
thing. I did want to, people had questions about people running through fields and things like that as far as a zoning issue. One of the things I've learned since I've been on the board of Friends of the Homeless is we're not necessarily an overnight emergency shelter. We do help people on those occasions, but it is a 90-day program that people are a part of, so they're there, they're a part of it, so there's not going to be tents or people roaming free in the community.
okay, let me address you, mentioned Van Wert. And I did look up the Van Wert situation and their zoning codes. So they did adjust, but not in a residential area.
Yeah, it would have been a business. I think it was,
Yeah,
they were on
it
like
was
the edge
not
of the residential and
residential
business.
area. Okay, well, thank you very much. Yes, ma'am.
I just need a little clarification, if I could. The problem is the way it's zoned now is residential.
Correct.
And they're asking you to amend it to multifamily?
No.
No, they're asking you to amend it to,
Operation of a homeless shelter, spot zone, the homeless shelter, 20 beds for 20 men, or 20 beds for women and 20 beds for men and 6 family units.
okay, so how would the new, if you were to rezone it, what would you call it? I mean, what would it be called?
It would this is the question before us tonight, right here.
I know, but is it a business? Is it still a residence?
No, it's not a
So
business.
is it multifamily?
It's a homeless shelter.
Which is a multifamily residence?
No, not according to the definitions.
So you would have to make a zone especially for a homeless shelter, is that what you're saying?
We would have to amend the residential zoning code to change that.
To include a
So
home?
you'd be making an ordinance or an amendment that says homeless shelter and then indexing it or identifying it specifically
yes.
for home? Okay. So it'll be under that headline or heading, and then there will be a subheading of homeless shelter. What the
It would have to be
specifics-
completely rewritten.
Okay.
Okay, yes.
I think numerous ways to do that, and maybe that's not this committee. But under the zoning code, residential, there is a list of permitted conditional uses in residential districts. And that's where we have the list that says multifamily housing, social services, and so forth. Add item F, homeless shelter, emergency shelter, drop-in center, permanent supportive housing, traditional housing, language such as that as a conditional permitted use under residential housing. Or put that language under central business district. Either place, thereby you have specific conditional use specified in the zoning code for a homeless shelter.
Okay, thank you, but let me clarify, that yes, this committee right here is considering the question of the residential amendment. If we vote to forward this request to the planning commission, they have to approve it. There is no legislation before us tonight. There is no ordinance. We're only discussing this to see if we should forward this on to the planning commission. Then it has to come back to council, and somewhere in between, there has to be legislation. Okay? So that's how this process works. Yes, one more question.
So you're saying this committee can decide to forward it to the planning commission, and the planning commission then can consider specific legislation?
Okay. Chapter 1151 of the codified ordinances, initiation of zoning amendments. Council, either on petition of a property owner, recommendation of the planning commission, or on its own initiative, may amend or change the number, shape, area, or regulations of or with any zone or district, but no such amendment shall change. Yeah.
We would recommend it to council. Council would say yes or no to the planning commission. Then it would go back to council.
No, we would go. We recommend
The
it to
committee would
planning.
recommend it to council. if we
No,
voted.
to planning, and then it comes
Yeah.
back.
After that.
Okay, excuse us. Or the change shall be effective unless the ordinance proposing is first submitted to the planning commission for approval, disapproval, or recommendation. Okay, so at this point, the zoning and annexation committee, we can make a referral to the planning commission regarding this amendment, or we don't. It depends on if there's a motion. Regardless, anything has to be approved by the planning commission. And Mr. Risser, what you said back there, a lot of that is a conditional permitted use has to be approved by the zoning board of appeals. Okay, so just to be clear, we don't have any legislation here before us tonight.
Correct.
Yes,
You don't even have to answer if it's out of line, but they're talking about, you have to get to certain things for the homeless shelter, multifamily. What's the current one listed as? If it's something new that has to be created, is that even listed as a multifamily homeless shelter? Or is it not listed as a homeless shelter at all, what we currently use?
that's a question for the law director and
So
the
it's not.
definition.
So it's not listed as a homeless shelter or multifamily use? That would be a yes or no answer.
A homeless shelter definition is not currently in our zoning code.
So there is no homeless shelter in our zoning code currently, so that
No.
homeless shelter, there is none in our, well, that answers that question. So this is something new, we're trying to establish something new, because there is no
Correct.
homeless shelter established in our community.
Correct. Well, I mean, we do have a homeless shelter operating
We have one
in their
operating.
current location. But the question is, Yes, you said it, making something new for
Is there something in the law that says that is
this
a multi-family
location.
homeless shelter? If not, it's operating illegally. I don't understand why we have to make something new if that's not even legal. I don't know why we're even here for that.
Well,
And I think there needs to be one, but if you build one
Right.
on that property is soaking wet all the time. Within 4 to 5 years, your foundation is gonna crack. Trust me, I've lived there. I've lived there 9 years. Go look at my driveway. Go look at my neighbor's driveway. He's sitting right up here. He had to replace his driveway, thousands of dollars. You guys say, well, we'll put a fence up.
Okay,
You can't do nothing into there.
well, thank you. We're gonna move to administration. Committee comments, council comments. So I'm gonna, first let me start with, the mayor is in Washington DC in another meeting tonight. But he, forwarded this statement to me. The matter being considered by the Zoning and Annexation Committee is not a permitted principal use in the city's residential zoning and therefore should be rejected. From the law director, who also could not be here tonight, please be advised that as it stands currently, it is my legal and professional opinion that the proposed homeless shelter is not permitted in a residential zone in the city as either a conditional or principal use. As outlined herein, the city council would have to act to permit the same, subject to the proper provisions of the Ohio Revised Code. Okay. Anybody else from administration? Okay. Council. Committee.
My opinion is it's definitely not on merit, but the zoning issue of if we open that Pandora's box in spot zone, it could be for the whole entire city, so that's where I stand on that.
Thank you.
And I would second that. I represent many of you guys here in the room. I can't in good faith vote yes or make a motion to move this out of the committee, simply because I don't feel that's a good spot for it. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Okay. So,
Council comments.
oh, I asked for council comments already. And they're just staring up. Okay,
All right.
do I have a
I'll
motion?
I'll make a motion to deny the request for zoning code change on the portion of 435 Bear Avenue Northeast Rear, parcel number 430-196-9001.
I'll second.
Okay, and I'll take a vote.
I vote yes.
Yes.
Yes. Okay, so, by that, no referral will be made to the planning commission, so the issue is closed. So,
Motion to adjourn.
thank you.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion, what?
Motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Meeting adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
This meeting in New Philadelphia City Council will now come to order. Would you please rise and remain standing for the invocation and the Pledge of Allegiance? Father, you bless us with this day and a winter day, but it's a day that you have made. We're just thankful together as a council here this evening to be about your work, and we just pray your blessing on our decision-making here this evening. Father, we continually pray for our young men that are serving in the military. We also pray for our policemen and firemen for their safety. And we just keep praying for all the businesses and citizens in New Philadelphia. And we just give you all the praise. Amen.
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 I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Thank you. Everybody made it. Welcome all those who are watching by streaming this evening. Our council meeting, as always, we get on the city website. You can stream our council meetings. Roll call.
Mr. Holland.
Present electronically.
Mr. Lonzer.
Here.
Mrs. May.
Present.
Mr. Pace.
Present.
Mrs. Ramos.
Here.
Mr. Ricklick.
Present.
Mr. Ribbit.
Mr. Rippeth should be here in just a few minutes. He called me and he's getting off the Philly. And there he is right here.
Oh,
Mr.
perfect.
Say present.
Present.
All right, thank you. All right, everybody's had a chance to review the agenda. Are there any additions or corrections to tonight's agenda? All right, hearing none, entertain a motion to accept the agenda for tonight's council meeting. Mr. Lonzer, thank you. Need a second? Mrs. May, thank you. Any discussion by administration or council? Roll call.
Mr. Lonzer.
Yes.
Mrs. May.
Yes.
Mr. Holland.
Yes.
Mr. Pace.
Yes.
Mrs. Ramos.
Yes.
Mr. Ricklick.
Yes.
Mr. Ribbit.
Yes.
All right. Minutes, everybody's had a chance to read the minutes from our last council meeting. Are there any additions or corrections to those minutes? Hearing none, to entertain a motion to approve. Mr. Pace, need a second?
Second.
Mr. Ribbit, thank you. Any questions by administration and council? Roll call.
Mr. Pace.
Yes.
Mr. Ribbit.
Yes.
Mr. Holland.
Yes.
Mr. Lonzer.
Yes.
Mrs. May.
Yes.
Mrs. Ramos.
Yes.
Mr. Ricklick.
Yes.
All right, minutes been approved. Correspondence, Ms. Courtwright.
To Clerk of Council from Treasurer Gerber dated February 28th, 2023, the Investment and Savings Report. To Council and Administration from Income Tax Administrator Vicki Daniels, this is dated March 3rd, 2023, the February Income Tax Report. To Council and Administration from Assistant to the Auditor Heather Denham, dated March 3rd, 2023. This is the Statement of Cash Position from Revenue and Expense for February of 2023, the Expense Report with Encumbrance Details for February of 2023, and an Independent Contractor Worker Acknowledgement. To Council and Administration from Executive Administrative Assistant to the Mayor Jamie Bailey, dated February 28th, 2023. This is the Mayor's Month-End Report. To council members from Councilwoman Ramos, dated March 8th, 2023. This is an email titled Questions Regarding the Homeless Shelter and Tentative Agenda for March 13th Zoning and Annexation Committee meeting. To Councilwoman Ramos from Matt Ritzert, co-chairperson of House of Hope Committee, dated March 13th, 2023. This is an email titled FOTH Zoning Issue. And to Council and Administration from Mayor Day, dated March 13th, 2023. The Mayor's Report. And that concludes correspondence for this evening, Mr. President.
All right, thank you, Ms. Courtwright. We'll move on to our administrative reports. Mayor Day is excused this evening. He's DC. I know he sent out, everybody should have a copy of the Mayor's Report dated March 13th, 2023. Some of the highlights, if anybody's been down to the South Side Park and walked their dog in all the parking areas that they were grass, supposed to be grass. Well, they've never been grass. They've been a lot of mud. So we finally got approval where we put some limestone in there to correct those parking areas. And so hopefully that kind of solves that solution. Also, there's plans being made for the Southside Community Park Phase 2, which would be completion of the road from the new entrance all the way around to the soccer and football field. So that's is much needed, and also some restrooms and concession stands, and so that'll be get that done. That'll be a great help and get all the traffic off of the other township roads and go back to the South Side Park. Also, the mayor talks about some growth at the new town mall, some new businesses going in there, and so I don't know if you have any questions, you can talk to the mayor, but that's pretty much the highlights of the mayor's report. Move on to Service Director, Mr. McAbeer.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Mr. President. Just a quick update. As you know, Glen Drive project, third time was a charm on bidding that, as we all know. So we bid that March 8th. We had bid openings. We had 4 bids received, all pretty competitive. We will check, we're checking quantities right now, make sure the quantities are correct on what was bid out. We'll hold a board of control to award that contract sometime next week. I'll report on the winning bidder at the next council meeting, and that's the end of my report.
How's our salt supply doing? It's been a mild winter.
Yeah, I was just talking to some of the folks as we was coming in. And not only that, if you think about everything, the wear and tear on the trucks plus overtime out of general service. If you just think of overtime alone of a savings, you don't think of too many other things besides just salt.
Yeah.
And I was talking to Mr. McLean when he was in here. They'll probably be giving salt away next year when we don't need much. You know what I mean? Because we all know how I've reported on that, how it fluctuates so much, and it's been, 84, and it's been as high as 98, and we've had it as low as $56 since I've had this position. So it'll be back down again, but our storage won't be able to hold too much more. So, but yeah, it's been very good for budgetary reasons for sure.
All right. Thank you, Mr. McAbeer. Safety Director, Mr. Popham.
Thank you, Mr. President. No report.
All right, Mrs. Gundy is excused from the meeting tonight, so we'll move on to the Treasurer's Report. Mr. Gerber.
No report.
All right. And our Law Director, man, we're saving time here. Marvin's not here tonight, so no report.
2 hours early. Amen.
We'll move on to our Board Commission reports. Joe Day is usually the Planning Commission. I don't know, Ron, do you know when the next Planning Commission?
Actually, the next Planning Commission meeting will be, held in April. The March meeting was canceled because it was held for tomorrow. With him being in DC, it has been rescheduled for, or just the regular April meeting, second Tuesday
Okay.
at 1 o'clock here in council chambers.
All right, thanks. Board of Zoning Appeals, Mr. McAbeer.
Thank you, Mr. President. Board of Zoning Appeals will meet tomorrow night here in council chambers at 5 p.m. with 1 variance request to be heard.
All right.
End of my report.
Airport Commission, Ms. Alonso.
Thank you, Mr. President. We'll be meeting tomorrow at 6 p.m. and here in council chambers.
All right. Move on, Park Board, Mr. Pace.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Park Board will be meeting Wednesday at the Park Pavilion at noon.
All right. Move on to the Health Board, Mr. Holland in Florida.
The Health Board met on Wednesday, March the 8th, and one of the items that was discussed that I'd like to remind everyone, the funding for virus injections and for free masks is coming to a close in April, and everyone that needs to get their virus injection or pick up free masks, just make an appointment with the health department and they'll be glad to provide that for you. And that concludes my report.
All right, thank you, Mr. Holland. Move on to Council Committee Reports, Finance, Mr. Ricklick.
Thank you, Mr. President. No formal report for this evening, but I'd like to report that the Finance Committee will be meeting on April 10th at 7 p.m. to discuss a request from the auditor for the Credit Memo Clearing Fund.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, Public Works and Economic Development, Ms. Alonso.
Thank you, Mr. President. No report this evening, but I have a question actually for the, do you have an assignment that you'd like to, I seen an email that they wanted to assign to Public Works Communication, Resolution 5.
Did I already do that? But that from a week or two ago? Did that just come through today?
That just came in Friday, I think.
I missed it, but,
But, okay,
I will assign it to you then.
thank you.
Do the assign. But I'll go on my laptop tomorrow and I'll
Yeah.
formally get it to you, Dan. My mistake. All right, we'll move on to Safety, Health, and Service, Mr. Holland.
No formal report this evening, Mr. President.
Yeah, I'm looking at that picture of you sitting there, that there palm trees in the background. I mean, it's kind of hard to look
Well,
at.
it's been 80 here today.
All right, zoning and annexation, Mrs. Ramos.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Zoning and Annexation Committee met tonight to consider a request by the Friends of the Homeless to amend the residential zoning code for a portion of 435 Fair Avenue Northeast rear for the operation of a homeless shelter. We heard numerous residents speak, and also representatives from the Friends of the Homeless Board. And the motion to deny that request was all voted in favor to deny that request.
All right,
Thank you.
all right, thank you. Secretary Committee, Mr. Pace.
Thank you, Mr. President. No report this evening.
All right, Contact and Special, Mr. Rippeth.
Thank you, Mr. President. No report.
All right, the floor is now open for visitors' comments.
Point of order, you forgot me again.
Not only you forgot, but you forgot again.
Point of order, right? You're at the top of the page, I miss you. Salary Committee, Mrs. May.
Thank you, Mr. President.
I'm gonna buy you dinner or something.
I have no report.
I'm gonna give you some Girl Scout cookies.
You have to highlight it.
Yeah, it is highlighted. It's a good thing I get my eyes. Oh, my goodness. All right. Now, the floor is open for visitors' comments. Anyone wishing to address council should rise, state their name and address, and address all comments to the chair. You will have 5 minutes to speak. Anyone wishing to, Matt, state your name and address again?
Matt Ritzert, 213 Lloyd Street in that city on the other side of the river Dover, but I'm representing the Friends of the Homeless. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. I know over the last several months, City Council has generously provided representatives of Friends of the Homeless numerous opportunities to speak on behalf of the homeless and the thousands of other local residents in need of food, clothing, hygiene products, and other assistance. Again, thank you for your time and attention. We also applaud the city's initiative to overhaul the city's zoning regulations. I think it was clear tonight that that is very much needed. We hope and trust that the facilities, such as the homeless shelter, will be defined as an acceptable use in multiple or at least central zoning district. If that were the case currently, we would not be facing our current dilemma. And we would request to the Planning Commission that a homeless shelter type of facility be added to the list in the current regulations as an acceptable use or permitted use in the central business district. Somehow there appears to be a perception that the shelter is causing problems and attracting the wrong kind of people to the city who would otherwise not be here. There is no facts to support that theory. The number of police and fire calls to the shelter may look high when taken out of context, but are really no higher than other multifamily housing centers in the city. The vast majority of residents in the shelter are from Tuscarawas County. This year, 93% are from this county, 85% historically. And the vast majority of people asking to stay in the shelter are from Tuscarawas County. The vast majority of background checks that your police department graciously provides are from people who live in Tuscarawas County. Those are the facts. There are no facts to support the theory that the homeless shelter is a magnet to outsiders who come to town to cause trouble. We have a problem with drug abuse in this community. The number of overdoses is staggering. We have a problem in this community with poverty. The Dover Philly Food Pantry serves over 600 families every single week. But to imply that the homeless shelter somehow contributes to those issues is baseless and false. That's like saying the courthouse causes problems because criminals are at the courthouse. For anyone to say that they don't want the shelter in the central part of the city is to say our guests are second-class citizens. No one would say you can't live in this part of town based on gender, on race, on income, ethnic group, or religion. That's the message we're hearing about the homeless. It demonstrates a lack of respect to children of God. As Christians, we are taught that when you feed someone who is hungry, you feed Jesus Christ. When you clothe someone who's naked, you clothe Jesus Christ. When you provide shelter to someone without a home, you shelter Jesus Christ. We have a responsibility to serve one another for the common good, and we should welcome and be welcoming and to perform that service in any part of the city. That's the Christian thing to do. That's the right thing to do. From a business standpoint, why would you turn away a multi-million-dollar investment in the community that creates jobs and helps the unemployed and underemployed find jobs? That makes no sense to me whatsoever. So again, we look forward to working with you in a cooperative manner to find a place in this city that will house the homeless shelter, preferably in the central business district, and with necessary changes in the zoning code to make that happen. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time. Thank you for tonight's committee meeting. Well run. Thank you, Councilwoman Ramos, for conducting the meeting in such an orderly and businesslike manner. We appreciate the opportunity.
Thank you, Mr. Richard. Anyone else?
I'm Connie, and I live at 324 West High Avenue. And yes, I do agree with you, will be a problem, a direct problem. My church is having a recovery event this Friday. Ryan Walsh is coming, and I would have to say that's going to be a very powerful. And on the record, I am 5 months sober of alcohol and 6 months clean of opiates. So I know there is a cost.
Thank you.
Well, I'm not going to be outdone by my daughter, but I think she's very good at
State-
this still. And the gentleman who
State
spoke
your name,
before-
Carl. State your name.
Name, Daddy.
State your name and address, Carl.
Carl Russo, 324 West High Avenue.
Thank you.
All right, I'm not going to be outdone by her. The gentleman who spoke before her, they're mega dittos for him. He spoke quite eloquently, if I can spit it out right. The one thing that I do mention, though, is the property that was being questioned. A lot of people were saying they have flooding issues. Back in '05 or '06, I believe. You'll have to, Ron McAveer would have to check the records. Great All loaned the city a excavator, and they let the city clean out that creek. A friend of mine who had passed away since then lived right there on 8th Street, and, right by that creek. And they were finding mattresses, tires, washing machines, knows what else they were finding in that creek. And it was causing flooding. Of course, yeah, the year prior to that, we had record rains, but the river would flow a lot smoother without all that garbage in there. Unfortunately, people are filling it up again. So possibly the mayor can appoint Mr. McAbeer, not that he doesn't have enough to do, somehow to keep that cleaned out for the residents whose property border that creek. As far as building something on that property, I had my reservations about that in the first place. But there is no question, we definitely need a homeless shelter. And when it comes down to the crime, the drugs and all that stuff, they're saying that the homeless shelter attracts it. No, it's already here. I've found condoms in my yard. I've had drug deals right outside my dining room window. Now, it's here. They're here. And a good many of them are coming up over the border. So that's my nice piece on this anyways. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mr. Russo. Anyone else wishing to address council?
Ben Lippert, 126 22nd Street Southeast, vegan. I just want to say thank you to Mitch Page, Cheryl Ramos, and Dan Lanzer for your leadership. I know we disagree on the results, but I always appreciate that you're willing to help out and support our community. I guess we're here at our council meeting to follow up on the meeting we just had because I'm a pastor. I'm not a politician. None of us on our side are. And I know many of you, it's easy to look at you and say you're politicians, but I know all of you have day jobs that you have to do before you can get to politics even in your life. So I guess my question for our city council members is we've kind of shot down a few areas. You've told us where you don't want this area, but I just want to ask out in the open, what areas would you support us building a shelter in this community?
I'll answer that. I mean, for me personally, I'm not speaking for all of council, but I mean, the only location that I had reservations is the residential. Only is because I think we're gonna get the same message in each of the residential wards, no matter where we go into the city. And like I said, and it's nothing to do with the merit. I believe we need a homeless shelter, and it could be in the city or wherever we just end up putting it. But the resident spot zoning is a big sore spot. And we really don't like to change the residential section, especially like the one guy spoke and he spoke to me and basically saying the same thing, that, hey, I bought a house 5 months ago, all of a sudden now everything's changing, you know what I mean?
Sure.
So in my opinion, I think the central business district where it's already located, somewhere in that range would be somewhere in the city limits that I think would be appropriate.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Mr. Rippett, what is your thoughts? Put the new man on the spot. Or we could just go around. If you would do me that grace, if any of you would just be one to share.
Are these directed to you or to us?
Well, it should be directed to the council chair. I think, the council as a whole, they can talk if they choose. I think as I've talked to all the council members, I think everybody's in agreement that we need a homeless shelter. It's a location and a lot of, second what Mr. Lonzer says, it's, the residential area is basically a no-no. We're gonna have to find something where it's at right now, maybe enlarging it, or something else in the business district that we can agree on and council can, agree on to move forward.
So, just to clarify, so most of you, just because we've been working on this for a year, we've been working on this since March of last year, so could you just show me like a show of hands, those of you that would be willing to support the central business district, or?
I don't think.
We can't do that.
We can't vote.
We can't vote on that.
I'm not asking you to vote on it, I'm just saying, where would you support?
Well,
To the chair.
I think, I've spoken, is the central business district somewhere that, that's not in a residential area that we're willing to take a look at? And like I said, all 7 council members I've spoken to, favor having you know, a homeless shelter, so it's not like we want you to move it out of here somewhere else.
We all have different opinions.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't, and to be fair, council was never approached about a central business district, you know.
So
Well,
business district would go directly to zoning, wouldn't it?
It could be the same way, I think.
but I think council as a whole, I think you sit down with the mayor and the service director, and I don't know, myself as president of council, I mean, we can sit down and come up with a plan and take a look at some sites, revisit some sites or whatever to do that.
Okay. So, okay, because I was just wondering, yeah, go ahead, Kelly, sorry.
Yes.
I would like to also speak as far as favor of the homeless shelter. I believe the area that it is now, which is Central Business District, if I am wrong, Mr. McAbeer, correct me,
Actually,
is
it's
it
in
currently in the
business.
Central Business District?
It's business, I
I
think.
just don't think whenever it was done, it was operated correctly or anything was ever said about what it was operating.
But that's what area it is right now, zoned
It's
right
in
now.
business.
Okay.
Yes, it's not
Cheryl, I am
That's-
speaking to the law, to
that's
the
in the
service.
central
Can I,
business
can I just talk to who
Yeah,
I have the floor.
I was answering
I
your
have-
question,
I
sorry.
have the floor, and I'm speaking to Mr. McAbeer, so all I want to do, okay? Thank you.
Yes,
Mr.
Kelly.
McAbeer, okay. With that being said by the service director, I am totally in favor of somewhere in the Central Business District, that it is currently located in, to get a new facility. The facility these people are living in now, none of you would live in. And if you don't believe me, I'll walk over with you at any time, and you tell me you'd put your family in that living condition, and they're just trying to help these people. And I think it's better to regulate this than to try to control it. And I believe putting men on one side, women on the other, and family in the middle is the way it's been proposed. And I think you are open to present the building to city council and the building committee so we can look at that. And it can also be built in a manner that is conducive to the area it's in. So it doesn't look like a sore thumb in the business district. And it will serve our public, which we need to do. Citizens need our help to find their way. A politician or an elected official, the greatest feeling and success you should feel when we've helped our citizens. No, we don't all agree on topics. There's no way. We all be driving green cars then if we all agreed. So we don't. But I think we all agree, we need to help people when they're down. And I believe this committee have spent hours of trying to find out how they can present it to council. The council can amend the rules of the ordinance and building codes that will satisfy what they're going to do. They're willing to bring the money to build this. They're not asking us for financial support. They're asking us for our support of council that they can build what they're asking. With that, I'm in favor of Central Business District. I think I stated that my first time I spoke to everyone. Yes, to put it down there where you're located, I don't think that is an ideal place. I would not want to build, whether the residential there or not, the elevation of that property is too low to have a successful building. Central Business District, where you first presented, I think should be something that your group, the administration, should be able to sit down and hash out what this building looks like and what it does, and have some regulations that kind of have ground rules, that this is what it has to do, and if it doesn't do this, then it cannot operate as so be. So thank you for presenting. I appreciate your group. I appreciate the citizens, because we need to have these discussions, and they're discussions. Discussions are not decisions. And until people start realizing discussions aren't decisions, we can overcome anything by discussing and hearing each other's ideas. Thank you very much.
And Pastor, being the new guy here, I wanted to make sure I wasn't violating any rules by answering your questions. So, having listened to my esteemed colleague, I feel like I'm okay to speak. I just wish there was something I could say that he didn't already say, because I had told the mayor when I came on board, I'm in favor of this project. I want to see it happen. I think it's a much needed and much beneficial service in our community. I just want to see it in the right place. What that right place is, I wish I had an answer. I love where it is now. if we can make something work there. I don't know how many of you have been, I used to serve the Friends of the Homeless as a pest control operator for years. So I've spent plenty of time there doing some work and appreciate the ministry that's going on there. I also want to protect our residential districts as residential districts. I think there's a place for you, we just have to find it.
Thank you. Yeah, that really helps. I think we just want to create those windows of communication, keep them open. I know tempers can get high since it's been a year since we've been working on this, but we want to work with a compromise with you. Nobody wants this to end with lawyers and lawsuits and things like that. We want to do what's best for our city, and we want to do it in an efficient way that takes care of people, because we know that your heart is for this city too. We don't think compassion's on one side of the room and compassion's not on the other side of the room. Let's work together. Let's get a compromise. Let's find something in the central business district or wherever we have to. We want to do whatever's best for this community. So thank you for your time. Thank you,
All right,
Mr. Kemp.
thank you, Ms. Leopard.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm Connie Clark, 6326 State Route 39, New Philadelphia. I wasn't going to say anything, but I wanted to clarify something because it was brought up about bringing in the plan so you could see what it looked like. The reality is, and let me explain who I am. I have a company called Mission Possible Nonprofit Solutions, and I'm the consultant behind in the background. And we can't give you, we have a schematic that was drawn 2 years ago with, at that time, a dream of a building that was much too big to operate, maintain, and service. So when they brought me on, hopefully that was the right decision, I said, it's too big. We need to be able to manage to operate this, pay for it. So we went with a plan of a building that would address what we really are seeing, which is lots of families, more families than you would ever believe are there. Most people have no idea there are families there. And I think that's the good thing about having had these discussions, is a lot of people are learning about the shelter and who actually lives there. But we can't bring you a drawing till we know where we'll be, because that land configurement will dictate what the building looks like. We know how many rooms we need. We know what we want to do. We want to give people a sense of dignity by having their own space. Imagine having a family of 4 and 6, and you're sharing one bathroom on the floor, which is the current situation. So we're trying to improve the whole setting. And something people keep forgetting with this is we're going to have counseling on site. Right now, people have to leave to have counseling. We're looking at expanded services at that site. Right now, I'm working on a grant with a collaborative in this county and Harrison and Carroll to take people in recovery and move them into employment and jobs and permanent housing. And that's coming for this area if we get the grant through Appalachian Regional Commission. So, and that'll be about 2 or 3 years down the road, and the homeless shelter is a partner in that. Multiple churches are a partner in that, job and family services, counseling agencies, and all through the ARC. So we have big plans, and that would be connected. Some of the things happening in that grant would be in that new building. So it is, as said, as Matt said, I believe, I may be misquoting, but it will be a huge benefit to the whole county and the other 2 counties that we're working with to address this terrible, terrible issue we have with drug use, multiple drugs, alcohol, and other things. And so that building is going to bring all kind of resources. And I think a lot of people don't realize that. They're seeing it just as a shelter is going to have supplementary services that we don't have access to right now. And I don't want to take too long talking, but I did want to bring up one idea that was brought by Brad Hillier when I visited with him a while back. He said one of the jobs he did in the Corps, he's just retired, but one of the jobs that they had to do was the dry take it off the courts. And it would be a beacon to people and another reason for more of a central location. But we would be helping, they already do IDs at the shelter, then they could get their driver's license. It's really hard to get a job work at night, maybe a night shift, if you can't drive, and you just have a bicycle to get where you're going, which is what most of the people in the shelter use, is a bicycle. So, I just wanted to say that we can't give you a drawing till we know what land we have. Because we've talked about a courtyard, where we would have an enclosed courtyard for the kids to play and the residents to have some privacy, meaning guests at the shelter would have some privacy, and whoever's around them would see the building, that they wouldn't, in bad weather, they'd have a courtyard of their own. There's all kind of plans that we haven't been able to share with you. And I just think it will really be a wonderful asset for this community, for the counties surrounding. And the reason we brought in Carolyn Harrison, that's most of the strays that we pick up in our shelter are coming from those two counties, because they don't have one. So
All right.
that's who most of our outsiders are.
All right.
And I wanted one more detail. We've had 85 people call for a room in the shelter. I think I'm quoting Calvin correctly. One person was from out of county, and that was Carol. All 84 other people were already residents in this county. So we really have to change the image that we're bringing in busloads of foreign people. It's just, Matt addressed it. There's a lot of information out there that's just not the reality we live with. We would be serving Tuscarawas County residents, and just imagine the impact if we get these programs going, that we could have on not just stopping addiction, but saving lives, to go on and get them into sober living and a job and a home. And, we're all, I think you can tell we're pretty passionate about it. Thank you, and thank you.
You're
Mr.
welcome.
Reynolds, for your meeting earlier. We
You're
appreciate
welcome.
that.
All right, anyone else?
Hello, I'm Reverend Joseph Vancera, address 1144 South Broadway Street, New Philadelphia. I am the pastor of the First Presbyterian Church of New Philadelphia, also the president of the board for Friends of the Homeless. But I am not standing here tonight in that role. I think all of my colleagues have really expressed that very adequately, and everything that came out of tonight's meeting, I think, helps us to move forward. I come with a more personal issue. Now, one of the things that I like to do is I like power walking every morning. I do a good 5 miles from the south side of New Philadelphia to the stadium and then back. Haven't done it for a while because I had a knee injury and had to take it easy for a little bit, but I just started doing it again. And when I stopped in front of the courthouse, waiting to cross the street, I pressed the button to go across. I looked up, and I saw this strange sticker that was stuck on the lamppost. And what shocked me is that it read, "White Lives Matter. Protect your people." That disturbed me a little bit, because it was right in front of our magnificent sign that says, "Welcome to our city." And yet we had a message posted on city property that was contradictory to that message. Now, you could obviously tell that someone had tried to take it off, but with those stickers on metal, on cold, it didn't do so well. But that wasn't the only one that was posted. On every single one near those buttons in front of the courthouse are those stickers with that message. And I would like to ask the city maintenance department to be a little bit more proactive in looking for stuff like that. Now, if you want to take a sticker like that and put it on your laptop cover, if you want to put it on your car, if you want to put it on a t-shirt and walk around in it, that's fine, that's your life. I just don't think that should be put on city property where it can damage city property, especially in a place that should belong to all people, and not promoting messages that are divisive, that are hateful, or could be misconstrued for something that they may or may not be. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
And I have pictures of those if anyone would want to see afterwards.
Yeah, I would recommend, if you see those, we need to call the service director and the maintenance department so they can, correct those things. So I'm sure Mr. McAvoy taking notes, so we can have somebody take a look at those signs.
Keep it up, Carl.
All right, move on to council comments. Any council members, I know we've had some discussion, any council members have any comments? If not, we'll move on to the legislative agenda.
Ordinance
Mr.
number,
President,
Yes, Mr. Holland.
thank you, Mr. President. I've listened intently to the committee meeting this evening, and I don't think that there is anyone in this body that does not agree that we have a tremendous need for a shelter for homeless people. I'm glad to hear the pastors speak. Our body has chosen to recite every council meeting the Pledge of Allegiance, which clearly says that we're one nation under God. God is also delivered to us through Jesus Christ, the representation throughout the Bible that we are to serve others. Jesus gave us several examples of that. He gave us several examples of the need to represent those who cannot represent themselves. He also pointed out the need to represent those who are disenfranchised.
Did it freeze up, Dean?
something went wrong.
I think he froze. yeah.
He's locked up.
Oh, no.
But I think we get his point. Okay. I think we get his point, yeah. We'll move on to the legislative agenda. Ms. Courtwright.
Ordinance number 2, 2023, an ordinance by the council of the city of New Philadelphia, Ohio, to adopt a new section of the city's current ordinances regarding loitering and declaring an emergency, third reading.
Is there any action to be taken by council on this legislation tonight? Mrs. Ramos.
I move that the ordinance be approved.
All right, do I have a
Accepted.
second for ordinance 2, 2023? Ms.
Yes.
Alonso.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a second. All right, any discussion by the community, administration, council?
Mrs. Ramos.
Rich, roll
Yes.
call.
Mr. Lonzer.
Yes.
Mr. Holland. Mr. He's gone.
He
Okay.
must be dis,
Mrs. May.
Yes.
Mr. Pace.
Yes.
Mr. Bricklick.
Yes.
Mr. Rippeth.
Yes.
all right, ordinance 2, 2023 has passed.
That concludes legislation for this
All evening,
evening,
right.
Mr. President.
All right, any unfinished, old business needs to be brought before council tonight? Any new business needs to be brought before council tonight? Hearing none, entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We can do that without Dean?
All right, we have 13.
We are tonight.